is the end. Welcome to IndieBio, San Francisco, demo day for batch 13. This is my 7th batch here, and if history tells, you're going to remember this moment. Just the way we have these distilled, iconic memories of demo days past. And I hope what you see today excites you and surprises you. You know, in the early days of building a company, you think you know what you're doing, and you start to realize you're a little bit out of focus, and then it crystallizes. And you really know your business, and you really know what you got. Today, you're going to see 12 short films made by not some expensive film producer, but made by the founders and an IndieBio colleague, all in the last 10 days. It's part of how we teach founders to really tell their story. And in these films, I hope we capture for you the crystallization of their business and the genius of their science. Pei, you want to share with people what the instructions are for demo day?
So for all of the investors out there, if you look below, you'll see entry into our portal. There are decks available for you to peruse, and maybe more importantly, links for the calendars for the founders of the companies that you're about to learn about today. Go ahead and click there, schedule time with them. And for those of y'all who are here in the Bay Area, we will see you in a few hours up here at Jesse Street. Infinite Elements is a perfect example of a company that's addressing an industrial independence problem, our inability to refine and have in our hands critical materials that allow us to electrify. And with this company, with Infinite Elements, being based in El Paso, Texas, and really doubling down on bringing a sustainable and environmentally sound approach to purifying and refining these critical materials, I do believe that we can have a durable change in our supply chain to make electrification happen.
Magnets are at the beating heart of the prime movers powering our energy transition. In the spinning of wind turbines, motors of EVs, the elegant regenerative braking and hybrids, and more, you will find magnets made from rare earth minerals. These are permanent magnets, essential in commercial use cases due to their durability and high performance. So it's no surprise that we will require 34 times the neodymium-praseodymium motors to fully switch to electric vehicles by 2050. What you see on your screen is Baogang Tailings Dam in the largest industrial city in Mongolia. This mine is one of the world's biggest suppliers of rare earth minerals. For every ton of rare earths that are produced, 2,000 tons of toxic solvents are also produced and released into this lake with the mine tailings. This is the dirty secret behind our energy transition. A lake lamenting the underbelly of our ambitions to achieve net zero. Dystopian. At Infinite Elements, we offer a better future. We asked ourselves, why stop at refining ore from a mine when we can reuse the many spent motors that will soon fill up scrapyards all over the world? We recycle rare earths from vehicles and turbines at the end of their useful life. In the blended alloys of a typical EV motor are a treasure of rare earths to reclaim, worth up to $500 per kilogram. Our story also started at a lake, not in Mongolia, but in Colorado, in the United States, in our own backyard. As NASA researchers in geochemistry, we studied the environmental impacts from historic mining. We prospected these mines, not for minerals, but for microbes, algae that could thrive despite the toxic conditions of these mines. We took them back to the lab and supercharged their ability to thrive in these metal-rich solutions and recover metals of interest. At IndieBio, we functionalized these extremophiles with rationally designed peptides that bind selectively to the metals of choice. We have proved that we can use these extremophiles and our proprietary biofilters to recycle rare earths from EV magnets. We achieve all of this with no toxic byproducts and no smelting. We've optimized the extremophiles to be robust to different substrates and to grow on cheap feedstock. At our El Paso location, we are building a pilot plant to launch a scalable industrial process that sets us on a path to cost parity at 99% purity.
From motor to motor, clean, green, and circular.
We are Infinite Elements.
What sets Gozan apart is that Etche was a designer. Prior to creating Gozan Bioworks, she was a fashion designer. She made products. And in the world of textiles, it's the details that separate what lives and thrives versus what dies. So it wasn't just growing a bioleather. It was, how does it stitch? How does it wrap? Can it take dyes? Does it hold those dyes and not, leak them out or bleed them out on whatever they're next to or if someone sits on them? And it was her attention to detail and her knowing excellence that gave me confidence in investing in her and driving her to succeed.
My name is Ece Gozan. 6 years ago, I was an up-and-coming fashion designer in Europe, an ambassador for 2 global brands. But as I grew increasingly conscious of fashion's sustainability problem, I had a crisis of conscience. So I quit designing and dedicated myself to inventing new sustainable materials. I built a small lab here in Turkey, which is the 4th largest manufacturer of textiles in the world. It is an incredible ecosystem, a fertile cradle for discovery. This is Gozan Bioleather. It's stronger, thinner, softer, more versatile and more affordable than both animal leather and any of our animal-free competitors. It takes a year or 2 to raise an animal, only to be slaughtering for its hide. Then another 30 days and over 20 chemical steps to process the hide into leather. At Gozan, we grow our bioleather in just 7 days. And it's not made of mycelium, nor is it made from plants. The key ingredient in Gozan bioleather comes from something we don't talk about much: moss. Moss is amazing. It gets all its nutrients from the air. Moss can live 1500 years. With its ability to go dormant and then spring back to life. And it's time for moss to spring back into our modern consciousness. By combining natural microbes with moss, an ultra-crystalline web quickly grows. The result is unparalleled tensile strength. Because it's so strong, we can make it so thin. And because it's so thin, it's soft, adaptable, versatile. These performance properties have quickly opened doors for us at major brands around the world. Our very first customer was one of the largest airlines in the world. We are forging partnerships with 3 different auto companies and one of the world's largest athletic companies. And to scale in fashion, we are supported by DESA, the fastest growing leather good firm in Turkey. Moss was one of the Earth's very first plants. It carpeted our rocky planet, filled the skies with oxygen, and created the first soil. Now it has a new role. Gozan, not an alternative to leather, the future of leather.
So I've known one of the co-founders of Neuro, Doug Weber, for nearly 10 years. He's a luminary in the field of neurotechnology, and he is a careful, thoughtful, circumspect engineer. This is precisely the kind of person you want working on technology that's going to be implanted in your body. During their human trial, I went to visit, and as we were headed to the lab to go visit patient number 3, Doug turned to me and he said something, and I'll never forget it because it was so out of character for him. He just turned, he looked me in the eye, and he said, "This thing effing works." And I knew at that moment that we had a winner.
So I was a full-time college student, and then my entire left side of my body was paralyzed. I then had to relearn how to walk, and I had to learn how to be one-handed in a two-handed world.
Nearly 10 years after a massive hemorrhagic stroke, Heather experienced a first. Heather became the first chronic stroke patient ever to recover voluntary control over her arm and hands.
Every day in the US, 1,000 people are informed that seemingly mindless tasks are now out of reach. For these patients who have just received a chronic stroke diagnosis, about 40% of whom are under the age of 65, the options for recovery leave everyone thinking this is as good as it gets. At Reach Neuro, we've decided that this is just not good enough.
Last year, our team of neuroscientists, neural engineers, and surgeons had the privilege of working with Heather and 2 other young chronic stroke patients to restore and recover voluntary control over their arms and hands. In all, 3 otherwise healthy patients were able to take control of their movements.
When I have the stimulation on, it feels as if my brain is in control of my arm again.
Our technology doesn't control a patient's muscles. It doesn't have to. The patient's own nervous system, their brain, evolved to do exactly this. So we just decided, why not let it do its job? And when a stroke damages the brain, it disconnects it from the rest of the body, so the signals it sends can't be heard by the muscles like they used to.
The secret is we take a totally different approach. By stimulating the existing nerve circuits that send information to and from your motor system, our technology helps your own brain signals make it intact, all the way to your spinal cord.
Simply helps the muscles hear the brain signals once again. It's a patient's own movements, their own nervous system, their natural algorithms sending their actual signals to their arms.
More isn't better here. Our proprietary electrical prescriptions are tailored to each individual's unique circuitry, but the hardware remains the same.
Our patients regained intuitive control, and their joints became more flexible with a greater range of motion. We are poised to submit our IDE application by mid-year, and will launch our early feasibility study by year's end. Our clinical trials will be performed at the 2 best major stroke centers in the US. And meanwhile, we are continuing to expand our IP portfolio for device enhancements, like new lead structures and onboard movement sensors for our next generation products. These will integrate seamlessly with our core device, which today is already safely and easily implanted in over 50,000 patients every year for chronic pain.
One of our patients has spent tens of thousands of dollars out of pocket on consumer devices and questionable medical procedures, one of which nearly killed him. He just wanted to take control of his treatment after he was told that he had no other options. Reach Neuro is on a mission to ensure that patients like Heather can take control of their lives again.
This technology is life-changing.
I think it's really easy in deep tech to get seduced by new and shiny technologies. And it's very appealing to think about large-scale issues like construction and construction materials and think, hey, why don't we just bring in something that's totally different and totally brand new because it's so much better and far superior. But I think that that is the wrong approach, especially in an industry like construction. And that's why minusMaterials is the investment that we decided to make in cement, because they understand the market. Will and Sarah are civil engineers who understand construction, and they understand how the concrete market works. And the simple fact is, You have to give the construction industry exactly what it already uses, because otherwise they'll never use it. And that's why I'm really excited about their approach and their ability to decarbonize cement.
Oh, hey, excuse me. Quick question. Can same be better?
Same?
Better?
What?
At minusMaterials, we believe that same can be better. We're growing limestone to make cement, the same cement that we build with today, but it's better.
It's the same properties, the same chemistry, the same durability, but it's better because we're neutralizing the CO2 emissions from ordinary Portland cement. Ordinarily, we dig up limestone, ancient CO2-containing rocks, out of the ground and burn it to make quicklime, the key component of Portland cement. And in that process, CO2 that otherwise would have happily remained trapped in the bedrock for an eternity is released to the tune of 8% of the world's annual CO2 emissions. Our cement is the same as ordinary Portland cement,
but better. We use freshly grown limestone from CO2 consumed by our coccolithophores, the same sort of ocean-dwelling, calcifying microorganisms that produced all that limestone ages ago.
And it's better because when we burn this biorenewable limestone to make cement, the CO2 that's released is the same CO2 that it took to grow the limestone mere days ago. Carbon neutral Portland cement. The same,
but better. Look, all this guy cares about is it the same? And to him, the same definitely means no green premium. Scaling up to hit cost parity is absolutely key. As civil engineers, we know what industry that we're entering. We know the market, we know the numbers.
Last year, we completed a successful pilot project for Microsoft using our biorenewable limestone. More than 50% of embodied carbon in a data center comes from concrete, but it represents only 1% of the material cost. We're actively seeking other like-minded end users looking to decarbonize their construction projects. Our non-dilutive funding from ARPA-E and the Breakthrough Energy Program are allowing us to attack scale and unit economics from every angle. And we're optimizing our process in our 250-liter photobioreactor here in San Francisco.
Meanwhile, we're laying the groundwork with industry incumbents to deploy first-of-their-kind, pilot-scale regenerative limestone quarries. Modular farms where we're industrializing coccolithophore cultivation to supply the cement industry with the same limestone they already use, but better. Our biorenewable limestone is plug-and-play with existing infrastructure. We are poised for rapid and maximum market adoption. We need tons of this stuff, literally. In the next year, we're going to be growing hundreds of kilos of our biorenewable limestone to make ordinary Portland cement. Because yes, the same can be better.
Oh, about Milo. So I just got drinks with Murdu the other day. And it was like 3 hours, had a great time. And she just told me everything about her competitors, like what they've raised, what they've actually done. She's like read all of their job descriptions and know what they're trying to deliver on. And I just felt like an expert after that. And I wish people like knew that about her. And I know we were, questioning whether or not is this the diagnostic endgame. And I feel like I'm so much more confident in that now because not only did she spend so much time in the NICU understanding that market, but how much research she's done into her competitors and how much her competitors are pivoting away from their original promise and how she's not. Like, I think this is founder market fit at its best.
There's a stat that still surprises me today, as much as it did 7 years ago while I was working in the NICU. for every 150 babies given an antibiotic at birth, only one baby actually needs it. So, for those other 149 babies, doctors are desperately eliminating every possible threat of an infection. But in doing so, they're also destroying the beneficial bacteria that the baby needs to be healthy. Now, every doctor agrees we should stop doing this. In fact, hospital systems have metrics of how good their quality of care is based on how much they can stop this antiquated practice. But the reason why we do this is because our diagnostic toolset is lacking. Today's diagnostics have to make a trade-off between comprehensiveness, sample volume, and speed. Milo is breaking these trade-offs. Much like how you can read a sentence without reading the word letter by letter, we can read the DNA without sequencing the A's, T's, G's, and C's, just by reading how the DNA unwinds or melts. We call this melt read, which we use to identify pathogens by their DNA, even down to a single nucleotide. Our method leverages AI and machine learning to quote-unquote read the DNA in a few hours and can accurately identify over 80 pathogens and counting. In contrast, it takes 3 days for blood culture results to come back to rule out a few pathogens. In less time than that, we can develop a completely new diagnostic for a new emerging pathogen and deploy it to our machines all around the world, over the air. No new cartridges, no new reagents. We are introducing our product first in the neonatal ICU, where speed and accuracy are paramount. Neonatologists have been telling me how much the speed and comprehensiveness would change their clinical practice. The NICU is also the perfect place to land and expand because the tests are bundled into total inpatient services, which eliminates all the friction for reimbursement. As we establish credibility, the clinical lab director who makes the purchasing decisions will service more areas of the hospital. Until then, we're establishing an international foothold by adding clinical collaborators around the world. At Milo, we are disrupting diagnostics by driving results and revenue at the speed of software, not hardware.
Yes, IndieBio definitely isn't scared of commodities, and I think we've seen that we can invest in trends before they become trends because these are ubiquitous materials that just by pure necessity have to be reinvented. So in the case of Mara and MDF, we know this is a giant titanic market. It uses huge amount of natural resources that are greenwashed with monocropped forests rather than true biodiversity. So a company that can have better than standard margins, be a drop-in, be high performance, use ubiquitous feedstock, they kind of have all the pieces that it takes to reinvent a commodity.
Behind everything you think is wood are engineered wood products called MDF, medium density fiberboard, which are essentially wood chips that are glued together with resin.
A plastic with a 14 megaton carbon footprint
that off-gasses toxic air pollutants like formaldehyde into your home and into your offices. This glue means that this wood will never go back to the earth.
Here at Mira, we revolutionized the way we make engineered wood boards like MDF. In our process, we don't use a single drop of expensive resin, which means no carbon emissions and no formaldehyde off-gassing into your baby's cribs. Our wood can completely rejoin the circle of life. And believe it or not, our composite wood is made without a single tree. Instead, our MDF is made of renewable agricultural byproducts that would otherwise be burned and emitting carbon. And there's enough of it. Brazil alone has enough ag waste to produce all of the world's MDF demands using our method. We divert those emissions to turn into beautiful furniture.
The secret is this guy. He's the phytochemist who figured out how to recreate what happens inside a tree. So we have 3 different ways of making our MDF boards with 0 wood and 0 resin. And that's how we cut costs. Our novel process of making MDF cuts down material cost so much that we get more than 4 times the average industry margin on MDF, while providing a superior and greener product. Our boards blow the ANSI standards out of the water. The boards from Murat are 100% stiffer and 100% better at moisture resistance, which is a common complaint of MDF. Head to head, our MDF scores 15% higher in bend strength, so no more saggy shelves. We have customers asking for samples and taking orders. At our demo facility, we are cranking out board after board after board to meet demand. Scaling up is easy. We can even use idle machines sitting around the world to co-manufacture with absolutely 0 capital costs. Join us as we build our world with 0 trees, 0 resin, thin footprint, and fat margins.
I've had so much fun with Payam, the CEO of Dandelion. That guy is a lipid whisperer. We can bring up an LNP structure or a lipid, and he looks at it, and he can just brain starts to understand it and compute it, and he can guess at who made it because of certain assumptions built into its structure that gives it hints of a lineage to a certain academic lab and a certain company. The guy knows everything about lipids, and he can recruit. He and Morteza and Hadi are a blast to spend time with.
By the tens of millions, we got the mRNA vaccines from Moderna or Pfizer. The mRNA could be designed and made in 2 weeks. But the tiny balls of fat that surrounded the mRNA, the lipid nanoparticles, that took 10 years.
Out of hundreds of lipid nanoparticles that get designed, typically all fail in vivo. But when one beats those odds, it's extremely valuable. A dozen times, pharmas and biotech have paid hundreds of millions of dollars for the rights.
Lipid nanoparticles can be the holy grail of pharma, getting almost any type of drug to the right organ or even the right cell type.
Until now, all LNPs have been designed by intuition, trial, and error. We know the gist of the challenges. Balancing the negative charge of the mRNA to be neutral in the blood, stabilizing the particle with a ratio of cholesterols, tapering the head and tail angle to alter the self-assembly packing, and preventing clumping with these soap-like tails, which also govern how proteins interact with the LNP surface.
So far, this has been done with a small subset of lipids that science has characterized, only a sliver of the huge chemical universe. We are not the only ones to deploy generative AI to design LNPs. Several companies have been formed in the last year to try. Imagine another AlphaFold, but not for proteins, for the entire chemical space of lipids.
It's one thing to try, another to succeed.
To accurately predict nanoparticle properties, you must teach a computer to properly represent the geometry of an LNP. Without representation, no prediction. At the core of our success is a novel way to represent the topology of particles, which we invented.
For the LNPs invented by our Dandelion engine, we are accurately predicting size, charge, how hydrophilic it is, toxicity, and even transfection efficiency.
But that's not all. We are also predicting if it's free from existing IP, and we predict the ease of manufacturability.
Here is a dandelion ionizable lipid that the world has not only never seen before, it's of a design no human has thought of before.
Here's a novel LNP we designed for one of our pharma partners, which Dandelion predicts will have a very high transfection efficiency. We're testing it now.
We want a partner for every organ in the body, and we are deep in talks already on several. Join us as we do for lipids what AI has done for proteins. We are Dandelion.
If you saw the batch announcement back in September, there was a 13th company, Asterix Foods. And I have their CEO with me, Dan Even. Say hi.
Hi, everyone.
So they are in stealth, but they did raise a nice price round just before the end of the year. Congratulations.
Thank you. Very exciting.
So Dan, when can the world expect, and investors expect to hear exactly what Asterix Foods is doing?
So in about 2 to 3 months, when we finish filing the broader IP claims, and we'll be happy to meet everyone.
Great. Look forward to that then. Thank you.
I think the Nitrofix team is the answer to scaling the technology. This is a great team. Maital, the CTO, has a lot of expertise in scaling, linearly scaling systems. And Ophira, the CEO, is a seasoned operator in deep tech. And I have high confidence in the ability of the team to translate this technology and scale it and bring it to market.
Life is built with nitrogen. Nitrogen bases make up our RNA and DNA. Conveniently, our air is 78% nitrogen. And here lies a great paradox of our Earth, that this nitrogen is locked up by a legendary triple covalent bond, a bond so strong it took nature lightning to break it. Then, 124 years ago, Haber-Bosch scaled up the conversion of airborne nitrogen to bioavailable ammonia. Our crops grew 3 times bigger. We fed the world, and the world grew by another 6.5 billion people. To this day, we rely on Haber-Bosch. This requires the collision of so much heat, pressure, and energy, plus huge facilities that can withstand the chemical explosion that it burns 3% of globally produced natural gas. The emission of the worst of any chemical reaction. For every ton of ammonia produced, almost 2.5 tons of CO2 is released. So today, across academic labs and startups that descends from them, there's a huge race, like the space race,
to find the most efficient way to break the triple bond of the nitrogen and to recombine it with hydrogen and electron to form ammonia.
The criteria to win this race are clearly drawn out in public by ARPA-E, and everyone knows the price. At Nitrofix, we have what it takes to win. We use electrochemistry to make ammonia. Our flow cells operate at room temperature. We need no pressure. We bring in electricity, but we use half as much as the closest competitors. We have pioneered a one-step process using water as a proton donor. This is a holy grail in the field.
Our catalyst is cheap, stable, and scalable.
We use off-the-shelf electrodes. All this reduces cost. Nitrofix descends from the lab of Professor Ronnie Newman at the Weizmann Institute.
We noticed that the large majority of academic research was siloed, either concentrated on nitrogen activation or using off-the-shelf catalysts to carry out electrochemical reduction of nitrogen to ammonia. We combined both into one. This is what we call an electrocatalytic process, combining electrochemistry and catalysis into one.
You did great.
The catalyst was inspired by nitrogenase, an enzyme found in nature. Microbes in soil uses complex of molecules readily available in dirt, iron and other ferrous metal to form nitrogenase. Similar to these natural complexes, our catalyst fixes the nitrogen molecule,
reducing the activation energy for them to combine with hydrogen.
Led by Maital, our CTO, and expert in scaling electrochemistry system, we are improving our energy efficiency. we are building our stackable flow cells with price parity as our North Star. The future of ammonia doesn't look like this. Unstable supply chains, countries running out of fertilizers and food. For the world that will 3 times its demand for ammonia by 2050. For the fertilizer that will feed us, the coolant in our ACEs, the fossils-free maritime fuels, and more. Nitrofix will be there, on-site, affordable, drop-in, and emission-free.
The burden of regenerative agriculture is actually put onto growers far too much, and not consumers and consumer brands who are actually bringing products to the end market. What I love about Westborn is, they're focusing on bringing to consumers crop diversity, zero waste, quality over quantity. And for Camilla, the CEO, she's been living this mission her whole career. So this company is really just the next step in a very natural evolution.
These are cover crops: buckwheat, winter oats, sorghum. Planted in the off-season, they control erosion, then decompose into organic biomass that becomes soil. Cover crops are one pillar of regenerative farming, and consumers need to support their use. So I started here. I'm a chef, and for my restaurant, I made a fantastic pancake mix using a blend of grains only from cover crops. But it got me thinking about granolas. Could we reinvent granola mix using winter oats? We can. Farmers love us because we create a second revenue stream, income in the off-season. Then I began to use these same farmers' peak season crop, like the summer kettle corn that goes into our moon pop. The big idea came from reinventing the sweet, savory snack. Our Togarashi Crunch is our best seller. Turns out retailers are desperate for a more sustainable Chex Mix. Across our food system, the single biggest climate impact we can make is to recarbonize our soil. Most farmland today is about 1 to 2% carbon, the result of centuries of tilling and barren off-seasons that eroded the soil 15 times faster than it naturally formed. With better practices, soil can get up to 11% carbon, offsetting global emissions over the next 2 decades by 20 to 30%. Not just the food system's emissions, all of it. And here's some good news. It's happening. More farmland has pledged to convert to regenerative agriculture than was gained in the Louisiana Purchase. For this new class of farming, we need new brands that will utilize the bounty of their harvest. Westborn is the first and only pantry brand committed exclusively to regenerative farming and zero waste packaging. We beta launched our brand as the IndieBio batch took off, not with 1 product, but 26. Now I know 26 SKUs sounds complicated, but 95% of what we're selling is made from under 10 core ingredients. Resourceful. Already, we're in over 100 of the best gourmet stores around the country and 3 grocery chains. We're on television, and we cater the Vogue forces of fashion. Here's one of my favorites. Yep, that's Vanity Fair. This pie crust is no Betty Crocker. And nor am I. Our baking mixes recommend a tablespoon of avocado oil. I learned we can make avocado oil much more sustainable by pressing the oil on the organic orchard rather than at a centralized facility. And you can taste the difference because it's not blended. We love using food waste. We partnered with the TikTok sensation Oishi Vertical Farms to turn their frozen waste strawberries into an awesome berry butter. Sold out in 48 hours. In the next year, we'll launch more snacks and expand our reach to 500 stores. Sorry, people. The answer is not in the lab. It's in our land. Join us in supporting farms who are doing the right thing. Be a regenivore with Westborn.
We've been thinking a lot about how to add true value to therapeutics. And when I met Jonathan at Laguna, I knew that he was a great founder. I knew that he could get pharma partnerships. But I was worried about the value capture. In the end, they were an adjunct to immunotherapy, and I didn't know how much of the value he could capture. And in that one board pack, it really clicked when he locked in this therapy trial with a great Stanford PI. And I knew then we had it. The power of the technologies really could stand on its own.
One day on this segment, we hope to report to you about a company that has cured cancer. But today we may have the next best thing. A bold new approach to treating cancer has been already tested in over 400 humans, and the results are so remarkable that a biotech startup, Laguna Bio, has already secured its seed funding round and garnered support from cancer researchers at the very top medical institutions, Harvard, Stanford, and Johns Hopkins. 60 Minutes follows Laguna to learn more. Dr. Cottula, there's so much buzz about cancer immunotherapy these days, but yet the success rates are so low. Why?
Current immunotherapies are just not effective. At best, they work for 15 to 20% of the population, and that's because they're working on exhausted and depleted immune cells. On top of that, they're working on the wrong type of immune cell. What they should be working on are gamma delta T cells.
It turns out that approximately 1 to 5% of T cells in peripheral blood are a special subtype called a gamma delta T cell. In 2015, researchers have found that the presence of these gamma delta cells in and around the tumor is the best predictor of overall patient survival.
They have the speed, the power, and the breadth of innate immunity, and they have the specificity and the potency of the adaptive immune system. So really what we're doing is we're bringing the full power, the full breadth of the patient's immune system to beat their cancer.
But nobody has been able to reliably activate, expand, and harness these cells inside your body like Laguna. So how are you able to achieve what no one else has achieved to date?
You know, that's a really good question. It's not an antibody. It's not a small molecule. Cancer's a really complicated, hard problem to solve. And when you want to solve those types of problems in biology, I think it's best to look at how biological systems have solved that problem already. And so we're not trying to engineer anything here, anything new. We're taking advantage of biological pathways that already exist and using them for our purposes.
This has gotten 5 major pharma companies scrambling to get a piece of the action. Why are several top pharma companies, each with their own billion-dollar drugs, so eager to partner with you and test your approach?
The answer's all in the data. 1, we know that it's incredibly safe. The foundation of our approach has been tested in thousands of people. 2, it's incredibly effective. It expands gamma delta T cells 1,000 to 10,000 times better than the current standard of care. 3, it lasts for a long time. This effect lasts for months, so it removes the need for constant redosing. It can also be used as a monotherapy. This can be a total game changer for people who are getting hematopoietic stem cell therapy.
The initial breakthrough comes from Dan Portnoy's lab at UC Berkeley, who's also a co-founder of the company. In the last 6 months, Laguna has made major improvements that makes their treatment safer and even more targeted to harness and deploy the full power of gamma delta T cells to kill cancers.
Launching a meat company in 2023, after the struggles we've seen in the market the last couple of years, is daring. But Avio and Ingridium, I think, is one of the most important contributors to this sector, partly because they're solving really clear problems. The problem of CapEx and high costs, and the food science technical challenge of getting all of our alternative proteins to actually feel great in the mouth. You know, the mouth is 100 times more sensitive than our fingertips. And they have the protein. I think this is going to be as big a deal as Impossible's protein and the value that it drove to make these products, not just in meat, but all across meat through dairy, way more appealing.
I'm V11, CEO of IndieBio. Our story begins 4 years ago when I co-founded one of the first molecular farming companies in the world making animal proteins in plants. I knew that in order to scale, we needed to avoid the looming crisis of bioreactor capacity.
Costing hundreds of millions to scale, with wait times measured not in weeks or months, but in years. Running 24/7, there is still not enough global capacity to make a dent in the meat market. Avoiding steel bioreactors was a step in the right direction, but plants had their own limitations.
To solve for speed, cost, and scale, we use cyanobacteria, the fastest growing photosynthetic organisms on the planet. Architects of life on Earth as we know it. Cyanobacteria are so robust and grow so rapidly that we can see them from space. During IndieBio, we have gone from lab setup to cultivating cyanobacteria in a 100-liter photobioreactor. This cost us less than $5,000, which is 100 times cheaper than the equivalent steel tank system. With just $450,000, a small portion of our seed round, we'll be scaling to 20,000 liters. We replicate these modular systems to easily reach 1 million liters and beyond.
Cyanobacteria is often seen as too simple an organism to make proteins complex enough to replicate meat. However, the molecular machinery for synthesis and modification is optimized to make our target proteins. We have already demonstrated this by hitting 80% of our long-term goal, thus achieving commercial compatible protein yields for myoglobin, a key animal protein which carries iron to create a rich meaty taste. We'll be pairing myoglobin with ING001, which is a key culinary meat protein. ING001 perfectly replicates the mouthfeels of the foods we all love, without hurting animals or the planet. With this hero protein, we control all textures. Our mayo is creamy and light, our scrambled eggs are fluffy, and by binding coconut oil, we mimic beef fat. Ultimately, we know the market wants meat. Our first burgers and sausages bind water, fats, proteins, and carbs, just like meat. This means instead of leaking all the flavor and juice while you cook, each bite looks, feels, and tastes like the real thing.
I'm actually a little annoyed by how much people are over-indexing on carbon emissions and carbon footprint and not enough on the environmental footprint. So ever since we invested in Mava, for example, everywhere I see concrete. And I think, holy crap, this concrete, half of it is sand glued together. And where does that sand come from? It has to come from rivers. And we don't have enough rivers with enough river sand. And so the fact that Mava can replace all of that sand with unrecyclable plastics was huge. And now every time I look at a building, I'm like, we could hide all of our plastics in here in something that we're already going to build anyway.
My name is Mariam Mehran, CEO and co-founder of Mava. In Persian, Mava translates to a safe place to thrive. I try to embody this notion as an architect designing sustainable luxury homes. But I would ask myself how to make our planet a safe place to thrive, not just for a select few, but for everyone.
As our population continues to grow and as our buildings age, we will quadruple our demand for precast concrete by 2050. Concrete is in the foundation of your home, the bridges that connect us, the aqueducts that carry water and hydrate our communities. This humble mixture of water, cement, aggregate, and river sand keeps our rapidly growing cities upright. As the world realizes cement's huge carbon footprint, there has been a wave of innovations across the supply chain. But one critical aspect has been overlooked: sand. Up to 50 billion tons of river sand is dredged every year just to be used in concrete. There is even a black market for it. At MAVA, we are building on years of research aspiring to make concrete by replacing river sand with waste plastic, reducing water use, and curing with captured CO2. For 40 years, scientists have tried to incorporate plastic into concrete, but the challenge is maintaining compressive restraints. Recently, scientists at MIT Stipley replaced 2% of river sand, but in the last 2 years, our team broke the record at 40%.
I'm Dr. Monica Blazinski, CSO and co-founder of MAVA. At MAVA, we designed a new chemistry that can do with cement and plastic what others cannot. Multiply the number of binding sites so that our concrete can still meet the ASTM standards, all while still being lighter and more sustainable. This means building with lower rated structural elements. And rather than taking the typical 1 month to cure, our precast concrete takes just 1 day. The impact? Lower labor costs, which can be up to 40% of the cost of construction. Our proof of concept shows that recycled plastic can be used in meaningful amounts. Now, we're working to design a manufacturing process that can be scaled and cost competitive with structural concrete without compromising performance.
Next, we'll be designing this process to scale at economics that competes with raw concrete, so that we can service our multiple LOIs with sustainable housing development, multinational furniture companies, and beyond.
Join us as we create the next generation of green building material.
Wow, what a show. We're really proud and excited for all the work that our companies did the last 6 months. And I hope you could see that progress. Please, again, look below. You'll find decks and Calendly so you can book time with all the founders.
A big thank you to our syndicated investors. I hope you loved what you saw today. Thanks to you, our companies raised almost $1 billion last year.
If you're a founder or aspiring startup founder, we encourage you to get in touch and share your startup idea with us. Your startup is never too early for us.
And again, remember we have an event here at Jesse Street tonight for all the investors. So we'll see you in just a couple hours.